Welcome back to the special coverage of the opening days of the Trump administration 2.0. A new day has dawned. Joining me now is Director of International Relations for the Israel Defense and Security Forum, Elie Pieprz. Elie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
So we have a Trump administration that's come in, and thank God we're all breathing a sigh of relief, a pro-Israel administration, although we know it's not always so simple. In your line of work where you're dealing with Israel's security needs, how do you see this change? And what are you expecting? What are you hoping for in the coming days, in the coming months?
Thank you so much. I think managing expectations, as you implied, it definitely is key. And I think it begins really with, I would say, resetting Israel's relationship with the U.S. from one where Israel is asking for things, asking for permission for things, and then the U.S. responds by sort of demanding things of Israel. If you establish the relationship that way, you can't expect anything else. Israel instead needs to have a relationship with the U.S. where the U.S. views the U.S. as an actual ally, where we treat each other as allies, where the U.S. sees a strong Israel as a tremendous asset, not in the Obama-Biden approach of creating daylight with Israel, which was extremely damaging for Israel, frankly, for the U.S. and for the entire region. I would say the best way that I like to express that is I think we need to make America a great ally again, because in the past administration, America was not a great ally.
Elie, you bring up the issue of Israel asking for things and America giving them. And obviously, we saw throughout this war the very fact that Israel is so dependent on American weaponry and American aid gives America leverage in Israel's strategic decision-making. And now we have a Republican administration, but this isn't the old Republicans of the Bush era. This is an America First Republican administration. They have many concerns about their own fiscal situation with the skyrocketing debt. Are you signaling that we need to shift things in terms of military aid and the whole aid relationship in general?
Well, it's a great point. And I would say, again, the same thing. America should see a strong, independent Israel as an asset for the U.S. And therefore, it should see that it is in their interest to make sure that Israel is independent militarily and has the ability to, frankly, to manufacture its own weapons, not just because of a rogue U.S. administration, but frankly, a European administration might follow, like what they did with the Biden administration, followed suit and restrained Israel, and really made this war that we're fighting right now much longer and much more deadlier for Israel, and ultimately even for the Gazans than it needed to be. So the best thing that could happen is if this administration would work with Israel to establish that kind of independence. It shouldn't be seen as any way that is harmful to the U.S. Frankly, it is the best investment that the U.S. could have, is to have a strong military base, essentially, in the Middle East, which doesn't cost a single U.S. Boot on the ground, doesn't really cost any U.S. money. It just allows Israel to be independent and be a force for good in the Middle East, a very critical area of the world where the U.S. doesn't want to spend much time. If it can allow Israel to be that investment, that would be extremely beneficial. To your other point about the American First, one of the things that comes up a lot is, where this new Republican Party is moving. Like you said, it's not the same Republican Party as before, where there was an emphasis in a strong, robust foreign policy. But also, even when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism, there are folks within the Trump orbit that can be seen as somewhat problematic. I think that is actually something that I see needs to be confronted. I think this administration will confront it. Why? Because you know of the administration is strongly supported by not just Jews, not just many religious Jews who voted for Trump, but also many, many evangelical Christians. And I think the evangelical Christians who supported President Trump see the rise of anti-Semitism, the coddling of anti-Semitism as a major problem. It was seen really as a problem of the left in the last administration, and I don't think we'll allow it to pop up in the current administration or current friends of the administration, something that we need to keep an eye on. And I have full faith that this administration will make sure that it doesn't rear its ugly head.
Elie, at the Israel Defense and Security Forum, you guys really have your finger on the pulse of what's going on with Israel's security and defense needs. And we just saw the Trump administration, even before coming into office, being very involved in this ceasefire hostage deal that detractors, myself included, look at it and see that Hamas has been given a lifeline. How do you see the Trump administration, now that they're the only players on the American side, how do you see this going forward in terms of what happens if the deal starts to break down? What are you expecting? What are you worried about?
There is no doubt, and I would say that there's a lot of reason for concern. But I think what you pointed out is exactly right. The key of this deal is how it's going to be implemented, how it's going to be enforced. There is another deal that's happening at the same time. Israel entered into a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon. And when the terms of the deal haven't been enforced properly based on the agreement, Israel has gone ahead and enforced it, essentially has been active and has been doing it without any really pushback. If that happens, the same thing in this deal, and the administration supports Israel when Hamas cheats, when Hamas says to see what they can get away with, that's really going to be the key. Is the administration going to put pressure on Israel? Is the administration going to put the pressure on Hamas? Or are they going to put pressure on Qatar, which is probably where it really ought to go? But it's a fair question. It's one that I am hopeful, but certainly I'm excited to see that the administration will do the right thing and will not be putting pressure on Israel. Instead, will be putting pressure on Israel adversaries.
Elie Pieprz, Director of International Relations for the Israel Defense and Security Forum, otherwise known as Habithonistim. Just tell our audience where they can find the important work that you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. You can find us at www.idsf.org.il, or you just type in Israel Defense and Security Forum on Google, and you'll find it. Thanks so much, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Elie.